Hello, everyone, and welcome to podcast episode number 8 of the Tick Bootcamp podcast. My name is Richard Johannesson.
And I'm Matt Sabatello.
And the title of episode 8 of our podcast is Life in the Limelight, a graphic artist's contribution to Lyme disease. Our guest today is an inspirational young woman named Lauren Walters. Lauren is a recent college graduate from SUNY New Paltz, where she graduated with a degree in graphic arts, but she also studied psychology. Inspired by a Lyme disease journey that negatively transformed her best friend's life, Lauren created a beautiful site called Life in the Limelight. The project started out as a graphic design thesis of awareness and inspiration for those who have Lyme disease. In the project, volunteers were given questions. First, how has Lyme disease affected your life? And second, what inspires you? Stories are then posted to highlight the diversity and severity of Lyme disease in hopes of spreading awareness and creating a support system for those that already have it to know that they're not alone. Lauren has continued to develop this Life in the Limelight project despite graduating from college and ending that project, which has become a visually beautiful awareness campaign and online support community that is shedding light on the Lyme disease epidemic. Welcome, Lauren Walters.
Hi. Lauren, we'd like to start by thanking you again for joining us on this interview and jump right in to get some questions about your background. So, Lauren, can you speak a little bit about your background and your experience with Lyme disease?
Yes. So, like you said, I graduated from SUNY New Paltz. That was in 2015. And I got my BFA in graphic design, and then I also did like a psychology minor. So basically, I got involved in the Lyme disease community because my childhood best friend has Lyme. I don't have Lyme. And
thank God.
So, yeah, I know a lot of people assume I have it that don't know my story, but this is why it's good I'm sharing it right now. So basically, I found that I had to do a thesis, and I knew I wanted to do it about Lyme disease. I just didn't know what or how, because obviously if I could make a cure, I would. But really my best friend often would say that he kind of felt like he was alone in his battles. And so I did more research, and basically the documentary Under Our Skin really inspired me. At the time, only the first one was out, and I was really struck by how listening to each person's story and kind of following that along, it just really was more impactful than, just hearing some facts. It just made it more real, like it could happen to anyone. And then after doing more research, finding out about how Lyme affects people differently, there's a lot of similarities too, but just how it can kind of affect any system and it changes and all of that. So that's why I started sharing stories, because I feel like it really highlights that. And so for graphic design-wise, I made the website, and then I decided with my psychology stuff, I really liked visually. I found that awareness symbols are either, a ribbon or butterfly wings. And so I was really, I thought the wings were just a great logo, because wings represent, a lot of things to different people, but to me they represented freedom. And so I felt like learning more about the Lyme community, I just wanted to get people to feel like they had that again. So I wanted to provide a platform for anyone to share their voice, and their story, their journey, how Lyme has impacted them, and then they have a chance to make their own butterfly wings, which is kind of cool. It's just like a little expressive thing, but I know often a lot of people are too sick to do that, so I can do them too. But so there's a story, the butterfly, and also what inspires each person, because what inspires you might inspire someone else. And yeah, so I think it's just really neat. So I have the website, has all the stories, and then I did social media because, I don't know, I just thought I could reach anyone in the world, and that was just really cool to me. And then,
so, Lauren,
yeah, so.
question. So when did this project start? When did this initiative start? Can you talk to us about, when you began this journey, what your experience was like while you were going through it? And I believe you kept this from your friend, right? And it was more of a surprise when you launched this initiative. So can you talk to us about, the beginning, some of the struggles you went through, the hurdles, how you overcame them, and really just the beginning of your journey a little bit?
Yeah. So it's a year-long thesis project, but because I was in school, I had to go through the whole research department or whatever it is, because it was associated with the school, so I had to get it approved and all that stuff with the board, which is frustrating. And I had to set it up. I remember doing the form, and it was like as if it was an interview, and I was like, it's not really an interview. I'm asking like 2 questions. But yeah, so that was kind of one thing. I had to wait to launch until that. And then originally I was...
So was this positively received by the professors who were reviewing your proposal?
Well, my graphic design professors, they're amazing. I love them. But since we are in the Hudson Valley, they're kind of like the whole thing that people say, like, oh, everyone knows about Lyme disease. Oh, like, you just take the antibiotic and whatever. I was like, no, this is why I have to do this.
Right. So your initial resistance, your initial resistance was people believed that there was a great deal of Lyme awareness and that it was an easily resolvable illness.
Yeah, and it's funny because I would talk to my psychology professors, even though it was my graphic design thesis, and they were all for it. So at least, it's not that I didn't have my graphic design support, but I did have that kind of frustrating thing, but it just motivated me more. And besides that, I didn't really have any hurdles. I mean, I was just kind of myself was the hurdle because I cared so much about it, and I had never done a project like that where it was hard to start because I wanted it to be perfect and everything. And actually originally I didn't have the inspiration question. It was just butterfly in the question. But one of the first stories I got was actually from the Netherlands, which is funny. But and she, I think, included a quote or something like that, and I was like, wow, okay, like a little inspirational quote at the end. And I was like, that's really cool because I realized, I kind of internalize every story. Every time I get a story, I read it and I cry, and I don't know, I just still care so much. And I want the stories to be real as you want them to be and want to share, but it does get kind of sad. So I think the inspiration part is a nice little pick-me-up thing too. So yeah.
Yeah. So Lauren, did you find this was sort of an overnight success that it got popular very quickly, or was this more of a gradual process where you had to get people to feel comfortable submitting their stories through your website and through your social media?
Yeah, so I didn't launch the website. I think it was in maybe March or something like that it had to have been 2015. Because that's when I finally got the approval from whatever. I remember I had to do some kind of test too. But anyway, after doing all that, and I was finally able to launch, I had already started the social media a little bit just for feelers. And I found which is a cool psychology thing, my language, how I presented myself, also affected how people would interact. So in the beginning, I wanted it to sound, professional, like this organization thing. So I would say, we, share your story with us, like blah, blah, like we, us, things like that. And I was also remaining anonymous because I didn't want my friend to find out. And so basically, I found that people weren't willing to, share something so personal with someone or somewhere. They didn't know where it was going and for what reason, kind of. And then I found the more I said, it's just me behind the story, then people were like, okay, I'll tell my story with you. And then I ended up sharing the whole project with my friend at the thesis BFA show at the end of the year in May, which is Awareness Month, which is really cool. But by that point, people they didn't know who I was unless I private messaged them, and I was like fine doing that. Like, and I would just say Lauren. I wouldn't say my last name too. And so yeah, I found that people were kind of too scared to share something so personal, which is obvious to me now, but at the time I was like, oh, share your story, blah blah blah. But
so you initially had some challenges at the university level, and then you had some personal challenges that you had to overcome, in part based on the way you were communicating with folks, and in part based on your desire to remain anonymous because you didn't want to hurt this friend that inspired you. But let me ask you about maybe what I would consider the biggest challenge you had to overcome is that you're the curator of some very, very powerful stories. How did you feel about the responsibility of properly presenting these really powerful stories?
I still can't believe I'm doing it. But no, I feel like it's a huge responsibility. I'm still so honored that anyone shares their story with me and then I get to share it. But I think sorry, I lost my train of thought.
No, I understand. I mean, it is, and we just want to compliment you. I mean, we're inspired by you, and we're inspired by the way you're graphically portraying these very powerful stories. So you deserve a lot of credit for the very responsible way you're curating these stories and developing these stories and presenting these stories. It's beautifully done. It's respectfully done, and it is an inspiration. So we love what you're doing, and we want you to know that.
Yeah, Lauren, you really tapped into your skills and your talents to build this service for people to really help the Lyme community, and we really commend that. Can you think of one particular story or example that you'd like to share with us that really sums up your early experiences in the Lyme disease world?
Let me think. Well, one thing that was really cool was in the beginning, this is like maybe 8 stories in or something like that. So this is before I said who I was. You can kind of search just, your website URL or things like that, even on Facebook. And if someone posts something and it's public on their profile, it will come up. So I thought it was really neat because then people started talking about my project. Because at the time, there wasn't that many. Now I feel like there's a lot of awareness things, which is great. But at the time, I feel like there wasn't a lot of ways people could express themselves. I mean, I feel like Facebook groups started, and that was kind of nice because people could support each other that way. But I don't know, like you said, I just wanted to present it in a beautiful way, and just make a spotlight for each person to share their voice. But one story that I loved, I mean, I love each one, but this artist who ended up stopped making art because of Lyme, she sent in a story, and she made this beautiful butterfly. She drew it out. It has like a giant tick on it. But she did a Facebook post, and she didn't know it was just me behind it. So she said, oh, I just found this page, and they say to, like, she copied and pasted what I say on the website to make your own butterfly with whatever you want, blah, blah, blah. So she decided this is her opportunity to try to get back into art and drawing. And she sat down and took it as a challenge, and even though she would have to take breaks and whatever, she still was able to draw this amazing, beautiful butterfly. So it was a chance for her to just take a moment for herself and reconnect with herself too. So that was really cool. And she's in California. But yeah, she's one of the first stories. And then someone ended up, I think it was a few years later, getting a tattoo of that, which is also really neat.
That was really cool. Although the colors are different in the tattoo than in the drawing, right?
Yeah, so the tattoo, I don't know, that person I think has a child that has something. It's not Lyme disease. I don't know if it was MS or I don't know what it was. But yeah, but I still thought that was really neat because somehow I made this little, ripple effect of just spreading awareness. And that was just really eye-opening to me. I was like, oh my God, like I started that, and then she did that, and then yes, that was really neat for me.
Can you in your opinion, over the past 4 years you've been doing this, do you believe that the world of Lyme disease is different now than it was when you first started 4 years ago? That the stories are a little bit different, that maybe people have a little bit more hope, less hope, the stories have changed in any way? Can you speak to that a little bit?
Unfortunately, I feel like the stories haven't really changed.
Okay.
I mean, I've never really thought about it, but it seems like the pattern of people, not finding out till sometimes years later that they have Lyme, and then struggling to find the right treatment. But I did share, later on, a story. It was actually my best friend's mom, which was kind of interesting because that wasn't someone that has Lyme. It was just how, just another person that is affected that doesn't have Lyme disease. But yeah, I feel like, maybe if people share also what treatment they're doing, that's what changes. Because I'm open to sharing that too. I'm not sure there's exactly one cure for Lyme, but if you want to share what helps you, I think that's neat too. So maybe that's changed. People are doing different treatments. But when I started, I remember the CDC guidelines. That was when they said that Lyme wouldn't last after the 30 days or whatever. And then after I started was when they finally said, I think they still don't say chronic exists, but they say, it can last longer. So that changed.
Yeah.
But one of the things my professors said, they're like, well, what if in this time frame of you doing your thesis, they create a cure for Lyme? And I was like, well, that'd be great. And I was like, said the point of my story, though, is kind of how it affects you. And I think even if there is a cure, it's still affected your life. And besides Lyme, I feel like this kind of platform could, be used for other invisible illnesses as well. But my focus is definitely Lyme disease.
Lauren, from your research and all of your studies that you put into Lyme disease, what tools have you found are the best tools or platforms people can use that are both online and offline, such as blogs, social support groups on social media platforms, whether it be a book for an offline tool or an in-person support group? Do you have any recommendations for people that are suffering as far as forums they can go to, both online and offline?
Yeah, so I think I'm still kind of updating it, but I have on my website, I tried to find little, real in-person support groups, and I think every state, I was trying to work on that. So if anyone has links to that, feel free to send me them, and I'll add them to my site. But I definitely think Facebook has a huge community. Instagram community has grown immensely, and that's pretty neat because that's my biggest follower page is Instagram. And I feel like Instagram is so nice because you can share a picture, and it could be something, I share the butterflies and then a quote from each story, and then they can go to the website. But Instagram is nice because you can share, just imagery is so impactful for me. So I've seen people share pictures of a table full of all their pills, and it's just crazy. And then you're like, wow, it's just so, just the imagery of it is impactful. But so yeah, Instagram kind of took off, but that's kind of, I feel like, more if you want to share your personal journey and things like that to express yourself. But I think Facebook groups are good. I've seen that there's local Facebook groups. I know the larger Lyme disease awareness pages, some of them were public, and it's kind of hard to moderate. I would talk to the moderators. And, anyone could go on there, and then the people that maybe think Lyme disease doesn't exist or just, internet trolls would get on there. And I remember posting before to try to campaign for stories when I started. The moderators messaged me and were like, oh, you probably shouldn't do that because they're going to, get on your site and all this stuff. So I was like, oh, no. But so I think the smaller Facebook groups are more intimate. I mean, I don't know how it is now, but I know a few years ago that's how it was, unfortunately. And I know there's people on Twitter too, which is a nice, fast way to just share a little sentence or something like that. But yeah, so I think Facebook groups, and then also in-person support groups too.
Yeah, so it's funny you bring that up because we've noticed just this past week we've been pretty active on social media, both Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And one of our posts got caught up in a chain of, this attack against the Lyme community. And it's just amazing that people still go out there in a public forum and just start attacking people that are horribly sick and attacking the Lyme community. So we had our first taste of that this week on Twitter.
Oh, no.
And you're so right about yeah, it's so sad. It really isn't. And you're so right about Instagram. I think there's such a component to the imagery on Instagram where people, Lyme patients that finally get their diagnosis and are going through their treatment find it therapeutic almost to post their journey, day by day on Instagram. And so many people that we've communicated with say that it really helps them kind of get through and share their story and feel like they have a purpose while they're going through that journey and getting their treatment. So I think that's a major component to Instagram, definitely.
So that sort of leads us to the next area of questions I wanted to address with you, and that is that what we're finding during the course of our interviews is that folks who are suffering from Lyme disease find themselves isolated. They're, in many cases, isolated even from their own families because they're not well enough to interact with their own family members. And one of the things that inspired us about your project is that you're the next level of support for a Lyme sufferer, or what do we call it?
A Lyme.
Lyme, Matt. And that is that we hear from a lot of folks who we've interviewed that they are isolated from their social circles, and they in many cases have no interaction with anyone other than their family. So can you talk to us a little bit about what inspired you as a friend to pursue this journey?
Yeah, so often, my friend, we lived upstate in New York, so there's less people than in New York City where I am now, but basically he's pretty private too, so sometimes I can understand that being sick, you don't want to share things at the time, but yeah, basically, I don't know. There was a small in-person support group in Central New York, but Central New York is kind of big. So often people, and if they're sick, it's hard to go to. So I think that's why it's great. Facebook kind of took off to people. You can make a new Facebook profile and it can just be about Lyme, because I know sometimes people on their personal Facebook, when they discover they have Lyme, they will they'll be discovering themselves, so all of a sudden they'll be sharing all this information, and it's so eye-opening, and then it kind of unfortunately contributes to people turning away. And so that's why I encourage people, share awareness. Don't shove it down people's throats, even though I want to. But it's also nice I've seen so many people, talk to so many people that made their own Lyme page, and this is just to express themselves. And I encourage people to do that because I think it's important. And then they make all these connections with other Lymies, and it's great. Like one of the most recent stories I shared, she's just started a Facebook page. Because I encouraged her to. She had never shared her story before, and I just loved the way she wrote, and I think she's in Texas. And I was like, wow, your writing is really amazing, and you should start a page. So then she did, which is really neat. And then she actually did a talk, I think it was at her church or something. She did a talk a few weeks ago, and so many people had questions for her, which is great, because then, like I said, it starts this ripple effect of spreading awareness. And I love sharing other awareness pages too, because there's so many now, and I'm totally for helping other pages and, just sharing information and stuff like that. But so, yeah, I started because yeah.
One of the things that some of the Lymies have told me, as recently as last week, I interviewed a woman from Scotland, was that she didn't want her life's narrative to be a narrative about her illness. And she said when she went out, when she felt well enough to socialize with her friends, she didn't want to talk about Lyme disease. Can you share with us any insights that you've gained as a friend about how you can speak with a Lymie so that you're not forcing them to face this as their life's narrative?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's important to express yourself when you need to, cry when you need to, things like that. But you also need to live your life, and sometimes just forgetting about Lyme and the co-infection and things like that, or any illness you have, is also good. So you're not dwelling on it and focusing on it. With my friend, it was kind of like I have my own health issues too, so that's how we got even closer. Even though we're going to school, I think it was like 6 hours apart or something crazy like that, we still would talk every day, especially our freshman year. And so really, it's just kind of, I find you just have to be there for someone if they want to talk to you. It's all about language. And, I noticed with invisible illness, it's hard sometimes for people that have never been sick to understand, kind of, and they're like, oh, you look fine, though, so, like, what's wrong with you, or something like that, and, but you just kind of have to be there for them and listen when they want to share things, and just let them know that you're there, because I would never, pressure my friend to be like, what's going on and all that, but just letting your friend or whoever has Lyme is going through this to know that you're there is, I think, a huge thing. Letting that person know that there's this support network, I think, makes a huge difference.
Lauren, one final thought that I'm thinking of here is I know you've typically shared what you've tried to share at least one story a month with your followers, but you've taken on this effort, as you noted earlier, I believe, that you're trying to get one story per day for May, the month of Lyme disease awareness. So are you close to that goal? Do you need more stories? Where are you at with that? And we think that's a very honorable thing that you're doing to get a story out per day for Lyme disease awareness month, and it's a great initiative that you're taking on.
Yeah, so I always try to do something for May because it's awareness month. But I've always wanted to share a story a day for May, and I just never got around to doing it. So this year, we're a few weeks out, but I'm really trying to do that. And so it'd be great if people could send their story, which I know I've shared a lot of stories that are huge essays, but it doesn't have to be that. And I know some people are too sick to do that too. So I'm fine with people just doing a little poem or just a few sentences, anything to kind of get out there what they want to express. And then the butterfly is optional too. I mean, I can bust a bunch out for May, hopefully. But yeah, that's something I'd really love to do. I don't know how many I have so far, but I definitely need probably at least half of May still. And that'd be great if I could get more stories. So it's important to note,
like you said, that people can provide a couple of sentences, just a little summary of their journey. And if they're too sick to work on the butterfly, you could take care of that. It's optional to submit the butterfly, just to have even a brief story per day to get out there to really drive the point home for Lyme Disease Awareness Month. And we feel like that's a great cause. So we commend you on that.
So, Lauren, before we let you go, I'm looking at your Instagram page, which, as I've said many times, I don't want to sound too weird about this. It is absolutely beautiful. You have right in the center post, what has Lyme disease taught you? So I'd like you to sum up this podcast with us with you sharing with our listeners, what has Lyme disease taught you?
Oh, so many things. Well, even just doing this project, I've gained so many friends. It's incredible. because each story is pretty personal too. And like I said, I feel so honored connecting with people in that way. And every time I get a story, I stop what I'm doing and I read it. And I am just so thankful for each person, and I try to write to each person personally. No one else is doing behind my project too, so if people want to remain anonymous, that's fine. But yeah, so I forgot what to say.
Well, that is powerful, Lauren. You're doing a really beautiful service to the folks in the Lyme community and folks outside of the Lyme community, and we really thank you for sharing so many insights to folks who are dealing with Lyme disease themselves, the family members of people who are dealing with Lyme disease and the challenges that Lyme disease presents, and even more importantly, the friends and the social circle of the people who are facing the Lyme disease challenges. You've offered some beautiful insights today during the course of your kindness in speaking with us, and you are an absolute inspiration to everyone in the Lyme community. So again, thank you, Lauren, for sharing with us your inspirational presentation. And now I'm going to give our listeners our call to action. First, I'd like to invite you to check out Lauren's beautiful and inspirational site. Please visit lifeinthelimelight.org or email lifeinthelimelight@gmail.com, especially those of you who have not yet contributed your Lyme stories. Lauren does need another 15 stories.
Hey, Rich was going to correct you. That's actually lifeinlimelight.org, Lauren. Is that correct? There's no the?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Thank you. Lifeinlimelight@gmail.com. We need at least another 15 of our Lyme listeners to share their stories with Lauren. And Lauren, I'd assume that if folks are suffering from some other tick-related disease, you'd also accept their stories as well?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I'm up for anything.
Right.
I definitely think it's about ticks. They have all the co-infections, so I think it's important to highlight all of that. And yeah, so on social media, all the handles are Life in Limelight as well. It's on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and it's also on Tumblr. I don't know if anyone's still on that. And yeah, you can send your story through my email, or there's you can go on the website. It's under the page Share Your Story if you want to do that, because that just goes to my email. Or you can just message me on any of the social media channels. And if you already wrote your story, maybe on an Instagram post or something like that, just share that with me too. Like, that's cool, I'll share that. And if you have a blog or something like that, and feel comfortable, not being anonymous, that I can tag your blog if you're sharing your journey at the end of the story if people want to follow you, follow along. But thank you so much for asking me to do this.
Well, and thank you for agreeing to it. And Lauren, we want feedback. We're asking our listeners if they have feedback that they'd like to share. We would ask them to please leave a note in the comment section. Our third call to action is if they've enjoyed this episode. We're asking if you've enjoyed this episode on community and the autistic outlet for people battling Lyme disease, we're asking you to please share it with your friends and using the social media buttons at the bottom of the post. Fourth, please don't forget to subscribe to the show on iTunes and get automatic episode updates for our Tick Bootcamp podcast. And finally, please take a minute to leave us an honest review and rating on iTunes. They really help us. This is a new effort for those of us at Tick Bootcamp, and we'd really like to get some input about how we could develop the podcast and a podcast that you'd like to listen to. We promise you we listen to and read every single one of your reviews. So thank you, listeners. Thank you, Lauren. And I'm Rich Johannesson.
Matt Sabatello.
And we're tickbootcamp.com.